Greetings, people who probably stumbled onto this video by mistake. So while you're here, I've been talking about the amplified circle of fifths. It's an innovation of mine. It's kind of an invention I've been working on for ages. So I've been talking about that. And it's a very difficult subject. It's hard to explain. And I don't speak well. I have a speaking problem. So I hope I explained it nicely and clearly. I'm doing the best I can. I talked about how you can take my theoretical perfect chord, let's say C, F, and G, that's your C perfect chord, it's theoretical, and from that I took the major tones of these three chords and I mapped out those tones and I got a scale shape. I talked about that. And here's the same thing, only it's slid over and down. You get the same tones. You can get the tones you need for the C major scale by mapping out the tones of these three chords, and you can also get them by mapping out the tones of these three minor chords, okay? Three major chords, your tones, and three minor chords. I talked about that. You can check my previous videos if you're interested. Then I showed for my C minor major scale, which you would likely call a C melodic minor, I showed how you get your tones and how you map them out. But in this case, since you have a C minor major scale, this is the first scale phrase in my scale system. In my scale system, scales are made up of two scale phrases. And here you have one minor scale phrase and one major. So in this case, for mapping out the tones with the amplified circle of fifths, you use the tones of the C minor chord and the G major and the F major. And that's how you get these tones. Now I also talked about how ordinarily, if your scale has the first scale phrase as a minor, I said that your tonic generally falls in the minor data ring. So you're looking at this page right now and you're saying, oh, wait a minute, that C tonic is in the major data ring. And I say, well, there's an easy fix for that. If you want to teach young students, young children, you just take, here's that same scale shape, all right? That same scale shape right there in purple. So all we did was we slid it down to the next quadrant. There's 4 quadrants here, all right? We just slid it down to the next quadrant and we slid it in one data ring. Now you see your C tonic is in the minor data ring. And also we discover when we do this, remember how I said you take your tones of the C minor chord, G major, and F major. To get the tones for your C minor major scale, you can also do that by mapping out the tones of your A diminished chord and your B diminished chord and just add a G tone. You see, this is your diminished data ring and this is your minor data ring. But in my system, the letters, the tone names can represent entire scales, chords, or just single tones. So that's a beautiful thing. That's a second way to find your tones for your C minor major scale. You take the tones of the A diminished chord and B diminished and just add a single G tone and you get the same thing. There's so much to say about this. I'd have to make 40 videos and I'm not going to, but that's just another nice feature. And if you have trouble following what I just said, let's look at it this way. Let's look at the C minor chord tones, all right? Your F major chord tones and your G major chord tones, all right? And you add them up, and you don't need some of the duplicates. You get this here, because there will be a couple duplicates, but you get your tones. Now down here, like I mentioned, the A diminished chord plus the tones from the B diminished chord plus that G tone, all right? This is what you get, and you get the same thing, all right? So I wanted to review that. Oh, there's other ways to find the tones too. You could take a C minor chord, D minor, and add a B tone, or take an A diminished chord, the tones, add them to the G major tones, and then add an F, a single F tone. There's all kinds of different things. Like I said, I'd have to make 40 videos to cover everything. But when you learn this and you think about it over time, you would discover so many things that it's just remarkable. Just there's so many things to be learned. Now, I also talked about minor scale indicators. I said, well, how can you tell if your scale is a minor scale? And I talked about the minor scale indicators. I said the tonic will reside in the minor or diminished data ring. Then I said you'll have this pairing of tones. That'd be another way to indicate that you have a minor scale. I talked about that a little bit. All right? And I want to just review that very quickly. So if you're, as in this case here, we just showed this. So you see here that your C tonic for your C minor major scale is in your major data ring. And when you're teaching students, you want to show them something to make a point. You say, I don't like that, so you can change it. So what you can do is you can just mentally envision sliding this down. You can mentally envision basically this as the minor data ring, and this as the major data ring, and this as the diminished. See, these rings are all relative. You see, if one has a certain quality, then the next one is, the contiguous ring is relative, and this would be relative. So you can mentally envision it. If you can't mentally envision what I'm saying, then all you do, like I said, was you take it, slide it down, slide it in, then you actually have your scale shape drawn out so you can see it. So you can mentally figure out if it's a minor scale, or you can actually draw it out on paper so that you can actually see it. And that will make it clear if you're dealing with a minor scale or not. But once you get to know the scales and memorize them, you don't even have to bother with any of this. So that was something I wanted to say. You can mentally envision it, or you can actually take your chart and map it out. All right? Now, when I showed the different mode charts, I had many mode charts. I'm getting to the point where I'm not even listing or showing the traditional or contemporary scale names because they're crappy and stupid. The traditional scale names that you see in regular scale books, or go on the internet to look at your contemporary names for scales. They're so illogical. It's a jumbled up mess. It's a potpourri and it's a mess. So what I've been trying to do in my videos is stick with my own scale names. So I talked about two different mode perspectives. In other words, how to look at modes, how to approach modes, how to negotiate modes. So let's say we have our 7 modes built on or from a major scale. Okay? Now, there was 2 different mode perspectives. One was the single tonic form. All right? We want to have, when we create our modes, we want to have all the same tonic. All right? And then I also mentioned that there was the single scale derived perspective. In other words, you take one scale, all right? One scale, C major, that's a C major, and you make your modes. Here's the first mode, C number 1, the Ionian mode of C. Then here's the Dorian mode of C major, Phrygian of C major. When you do this, when you build your modes using only the tones of the C major, in other words, in this case, you start on the second scale degree of that scale, the D. Well, what would happen is, all right, with this single scale derived perspective, you would have all your modes would be the modes of C, that's C major, but your correlated scales, the correlated scales, all right, would each be in different keys. Now, I didn't speak clearly on my last 2 videos, but this is what I wanted to say. If you had your modes, all right, all built on or from your C major scale, then that means all your mode names would be in C. But the correlated scales, all right, the correlated scales that go with them would each be in a different key. It has to be, because you're starting your scale on a different note. See that there? So this is your single scale derived method that I teach. I don't know if anybody else does this. And then my scale system uses 2 scale phrases. In other words, each scale is made of 2 4-tone groups. So in this scale, C major, you'd have a major scale phrase and a major scale phrase, etc., etc. Now, if you've been paying attention, you'll see that, for example, here's your D minor scale, and that's because the scale is made of 2 minor scale phrases, right? Very simple. Here's your minor 2 scale, that's made of 2 minor 2 scale phrases. And here you have your augmented major, that's made with an augmented and a major scale phrase. But a lot of times I'll just use nicknames. I'll just call this the augmented scale, see? And down here, this is a nickname, minor 3, because there's no minor 3 scale phrase, but this scale uses a minor scale phrase and a minor 2. So since this is the 3rd scale, minor scale, see here's your minor 2, this is the 3rd in this group of modes, then I just call it a minor 3. That's a nickname. Later on, when you get to know the scale phrase system, you'll actually call it by its actual scale phrases. So there I wanted to show you that. All the modes built on or from the C major scale, all right? That's why they're all C's. But over here, the tonic for each correlated scale is different. In other words, the key for each of these scales is different. I didn't say that clearly before. The key for each of these correlated scales is different. Okay, that's one perspective, right? The other perspective is you want to keep the same tonic, single tonic form. So you see on this chart clearly that the tonic is the same the whole way down on each correlated scale. Now over here's your modes. The Ionian of C, but to make this C minor scale, you have to use the Dorian of B flat major. In other words, you have to start on the 2nd scale degree, all right, the 2nd note of the B flat major scale. That's how you get this. Let's say down here, Lydian of G major, all right? That little m means major. So you see, you took your G major scale and you started your scale on the 4th scale degree, and you end up with the correlated scale, the C augmented. Or like I said earlier, it's actually made of an augmented and a major scale phrase, but I just use the nickname. The point is single tonic. All these tonics in your group of correlated scales are C. They're going to be C. Whereas over here, you're starting your mode, you're building on different major scales. See that there? It's hard to show both of these because of my little tiny phone camera, but you see the difference. There's 2 different forms, and it makes your charts look different. But once you figure this out in your brain, it's a very handy tool, a very handy device for young students. I think. Could be wrong. So then you have, let's say your 7 modes built on or from the major scale. I showed those, and I showed the scale shapes. Remember that? I showed the scale shapes. All right, 3 more, and then there's 7 in total. All right, I showed that, the scale shapes for the 7 modes built on or from the major scale. And I wanted to show you that how the amplified circle of fifths relates to my scale phrase system. It's very important here when you look at this, and you look at all 7 of these scales that I just showed, that the first scale phrase, see this is 2 major scale phrases for the C major scale, but the point is, the first scale phrase is critical, the first scale phrase. Let's take a C major scale. The first scale phrase, of course, is major. So you have a major scale phrase and a major scale phrase. But we generally, in the name of the scale, when we name it, the first scale phrase is very critical. It's very important. It tells you about the mood of the scale, the overall basic mood or quality. So you see here in this major scale phrase, we have a major third interval. See? Now down here, this is the C augmented scale. We also have a major third from C to E, right? We have a major third C to E in both of these, right? So that kind of gives us kind of a major feel or mood for that scale, right? Now, if we look at the, let's say, two scales that start with a minor scale phrase or a diminished. So this gives you your minor flavor. Here's your C minor scale. So that means we have two minor scale phrases, all right? But you see that the C to E flat, the interval is a minor third. That's very, very important. That gives us our flavor. And here's your C diminished augmented scale, but your first scale phrase is diminished. So you see, you also have a C to E flat, a minor third interval. So that's how you get your flavor, and that's how it relates to the amplified circle of fifths, because remember when I said if it's a minor scale, one of your minor scale indicators is this grouping, C and E flat, and there it is. See, that gives you a good idea what's going on inside this scale shape. Gives you a nice idea. And it's the same way with, let's say, your C minor scale, your basic C minor. Here you have your C and your E flat grouping. See the grouping of tones? They're contiguous, they're touching. So I wanted to go over that. And if you don't understand that, then just take a look at one scale phrase, one single scale phrase. Here's the major scale phrase. And you see your interval. Your critical interval is from C to E. It's a major third, right? And here's your minor scale phrase. You see your critical interval is a minor third. And here's your minor 2 scale phrase, all right? The minor 2 has, instead of having a major second here for your D, it has a minor second interval, but still the critical, most critical interval is C to E flat. That's your minor third. That gives you your minor flavor. And down here on your diminished scale phrase, all right, a scale phrase is a group of 4 tones. You have not only your minor second and your diminished 4, but you have that critical C to E flat, which is a minor third. And that's how you get the feel of the scales in my scale phrase system while you're looking and using the amplified circle of fifths. Okay, I hope that made some sense. And I'm going to take a break from the amplified circle of fifths videos now. But it's extremely hard to explain, but once you get to know it, I promise you'll love it. I guarantee it. Once you get to know it, you say, wow, even just for personal use, it's a handy, handy tool. It allows you to envision things, and it also inspires you to think of new ideas. I got this idea, like I told you many, many times. I got this idea way back when I was making mistakes. This is actually a result of one of my many failures. I apologize for taking too long, and I hope to see you some other day again. Good night.